Chapter 1. The Aegis of the Emperor. No obligation is greater than the one we bear, and our watchfulness is without conclusion. Our fate is one of perpetual atonement, willing self-immolation, and service that knows no end. We are the guardians for whom no replacement will ever come, yet we maintain our post with joy, for we serve the one who granted us existence, and in reciprocation, we are sworn to his defense. Salvation will forever elude us, for we are not worthy of it, but only the foolish would believe this reality lessens our determination. The Adeptus Custodes serve as the Emperor's own Praetorian Guard. For 10 millennia, they have stood as the protectors of the master of mankind and the unbreachable defense of his palace gates. Now, however, the golden blades are being drawn for the first time since the age of the Great Crusade. Entire hosts of the 10,000 wage war across the void. Unfortunate are any who would dare to oppose them. Within the whole of the Imperium, no warriors more skillful or awe-inspiring can be located than the Emperor's personal guard. Their very biology is remade in their youth, sculpting the Custodes into peerless combatants, strategists, and protectors. To any who would defy the authority of the Lord of Humanity, they are an avatar of destruction. Every one of these sentinels holds breathtaking abilities. Their martial skill, swordsmanship, and battlefield awareness seem to border on the supernatural. The Adeptus Custodes are as far beyond the Space Marines as the transhuman Astartes are beyond a common human soldier. They are an unreachable elite, blessed with physical and spiritual fortitude beyond compare. In contrast to the Space Marines, whose battle brothers operate in coordinated squads, each custodian is a solitary force on the battlefield. Every individual warrior carries weapons forged specifically for his hands and is clad in brilliantly wrought armor tailored to his form. So armed, a single custodian is the equal of a dozen proficient adversaries. When the Praetorians are deployed en masse, they effortlessly eradicate enemy forces, even when facing impossible odds. As the shield companies of the gleaming golden Adeptus Custodes launch their assault, the foes of the Emperor are dispersed before them like mist caught in a hurricane's blast. On the field of battle, the Praetorians are living embodiments of mythological heroes. Employing the full breadth of the war gear in their armories, they achieve victories that defy belief. The rapid vanguard elements of the Virtus Praetors, mounted on their Dawn Eagle jet bikes, annihilate entire armies, while the Alarus Terminators can just as readily strike down heretical commanders and titanic beasts with their Castellan axes. The enemy comprehends their defeat only when it is far too late. The Emperor's Praetorians have already butchered their leadership, turned their war engines into heaps of scrap, and carved a bloody path through their formations. Their only recourse is a panicked retreat, but flight offers little hope of escaping utter destruction. This is the destiny that awaits all who would challenge the Emperor of mankind. Still, even a minor force of Custodes is capable of tearing through the enemy's front in a maelstrom of gore-slicked blades. These warriors are, above all else, protectors rather than conquerors. They are the Emperor's personal guard, the legendary 10,000, who have defended their master from all threats since the dawn of his reign. The Emperor commenced his unification of Terra in the most desperate chapter of the era called the Old Night. Humanity's birthplace had devolved into a realm of nightmares, where armies of alien creatures clashed under the direction of deranged warlords, all in service to corrupt and twisted masters. It is hardly surprising that the historical records from that terrible age are sealed within the deepest vaults of the imperial palace. Yet, should an audacious historian manage to access these forbidden archives, they would discover that even the most ancient texts describing the Emperor's campaigns make reference to the warriors at his side. Towering and powerful figures in plumed helms, bearing golden spears. Throughout the terrors of the Unification Wars, the failed uprising of the Thunder Warriors, and the nascent stages of the Imperium's founding, the Custodian Guard was the unwavering blade pledged to the master of mankind. It has been said that no spectacle in all of history was as grand as the Golden Legion marching to war with the Emperor at its head. For centuries, the combatants of the Legio Custodes, as they were known then, earned themselves unending glory. No opposing force could stand against them, especially when commanded by the peerless Captain General Constantin Valdor. Even in the age of the Horus Heresy, a galaxy-spanning civil war, the Praetorians of the Emperor held fast to their unyielding resolve and perfect loyalty. Across the Imperium, they were celebrated as the supreme warriors of the Master of mankind. Yet, at the final, pivotal moment of this colossal struggle, the Legio Custodes became the Adeptus Custodes. They could no longer fight at their sovereign's side, as the Emperor had been reduced to a broken, dying ruin, his potent spirit sustained only by the arcane engines of the Golden Throne. From that day forward, the Praetorians were charged with a new duty: to guard the physical shell of their adored creator, whatever the cost. To mark their failure, the shamed bodyguards took to wearing robes of mournful black, a raiment of grief they have never since cast off. For many thousands of years, the Adeptus Custodes have kept their unblinking vigil. Over these long centuries, thanks to the extraordinary genetic sciences used in their making, these warriors have been immune to the aging that afflicts normal men. Only the most catastrophic injuries can end their seemingly immortal lives. A great number of the Praetorians have lived for well over a millennium, and in that time, these warriors have perpetually sharpened their abilities, educated themselves in all forms of esoteric lore and science, and drilled tactical responses to every conceivable scenario. By way of ritualized combat doctrines called the Blood Games, the Custodes relentlessly probe the defenses of Terra. In these exercises, Praetorians, adopting various personas, scout every potential avenue an enemy could use to bypass the walls and gateways that protect the Golden Throne. In addition, the Emperor's bodyguards utilize fractal-based mental training, strategic forecasting that covers centuries of possibilities, and intricate battle simulations within a device known as a hallucinarium, preparing them for the day they might again be called to war beyond their world. When the mysterious Great Rift Tor opened the galaxy and rowboat Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was restored to the position of Lord Commander of the Imperium, the moment for change had arrived. Throughout the cosmos, forces of chaos, devoted traitors, and shrieking legions of demons erupted from the Empyrean tempests. The Sol system itself was threatened. Humanity's most hated adversaries were now poised to strike at the heart of Holy Terra. It became increasingly clear that the Adeptus Custodes could not simply stand a silent watch in the palace as the Imperium burned and the fires of conflict crept closer each day. The dangers to the Golden Throne had become so grave that they had to be confronted and destroyed preemptively, before they could gather their full strength. And so, while a formidable garrison of Custodes remained to defend the Emperor on Terra, dozens of shield companies ventured forth into the galaxy to seek and destroy the foes who threatened to once more tear their master from them. The assaults of the Praetorians are like the striking of the Emperor's own wrath, a blade sharpened by 10,000 years of readiness. Naturally, the Custodes have fought in other conflicts since the heresy. Common mortals would be driven mad by the terror of learning about the clandestine wars waged by the Emperor's guardians both on and beyond the throne world. The bodyguards have stemmed the tide of deadly beings sealed by runic wards in the crypts beneath the Himalayan mountains. They have launched expeditions into nightmare-filled pockets of the warp, wiped out subversive cults in the labyrinthine tunnels of the great manufactories, and put to the sword the followers of dangerously radical inquisitors who believed the emperor could only ascend to true godhood upon his death. These conflicts have not stopped, even as the 10,000 have taken a more proactive role in purging traitors and heretics across the breadth of known space. Much like the greater Imperium, the Adeptus Custodes are now fighting on every front. I stood my post for an entire century, enveloped by the grave shadows of the Sanctum Imperialis. I was as still as any statue, but forever watchful, constantly poised to annihilate any hidden menace. Outside these walls, days, months, and years flew by without restraint, but within them, time itself was nearly motionless and nothing was altered. For 100 years I was inert, simply waiting. And yet, had any threat emerged, I would have destroyed the enemy in a heartbeat. I have held this post for exactly a century, and as my duty ends, I offer you this knowledge: patience is also a weapon. During the dark age of technology, humanity courted its own destruction through its boundless arrogance. Venturing from its terrestrial cradle, mankind became ever more self-assured as it journeyed between the stars. Aided by its innate resilience and martial inclination, science and technology surged forward at an astonishing rate, permitting the settlement of worlds ever more remote. The immense voids of the cosmos seemed to shrink as the power of Terra's children expanded, and the unpitying light of human advancement pushed Xeno's empires into the shadowy corners of the galaxy. This success was due in part to sentient machines, the ceaseless innovation of interstellar travel methods, and the creation of ever more exotic weaponry. However, the most critical element of this expansion was the power and daring will to reshape the human genome. Convinced of their own supremacy, the technologically advanced rulers of humanity indulged their insatiable curiosity, twisting the very laws of life to suit their whims, assuming the role of gods. In the end, this hubris plunged humanity into a cataclysm, bringing it to the very edge of annihilation. Entire planets were consumed by bloody uprisings from their local populations, who were often twisted beyond recognition by hideous mutations. Wars of genetic horror swept across whole star systems. The flames of psychic Armageddon devoured the stars themselves. The vast human civilization fractured in an agony of fear and chaos. A shroud of deepest night, the long night, fell upon mankind. Terra was located at the epicenter of this cosmic calamity. The planet that was once the glittering centerpiece of human achievement became a true hell, ravaged by prescribed weapons and biological horrors. Its people were lost in a fog of ignorance. Yet, many of the technologies that had ruined civilization were preserved in hidden caches within airtight vaults and bio-arcane crypts. Over time, driven by the lash of brutal despots, humanity started to crawl back from the precipice, and some of these caches fell into the hands of self-proclaimed tyrants eager to unleash these ancient armaments once more. Terra was again threatened with complete destruction. Upon its surface, gene-forged barbarians battled resurrected revenants pieced together from dead flesh, all serving the will of madmen, zealots, and sanguinary tech cults. The majority of historical documents from that age are gone forever, either obliterated or interred within the measureless archives of the throne world. Still, a select few are aware that it was in this era that the Emperor emerged, and that he, whether a being of divine origin or the pinnacle of human evolution, was able to skillfully command the troves of genetic knowledge left by humanity's previous masters. Drawing upon these ancient and perilous technologies, and his own unknowable and incredible power, the Emperor forged warriors who could unify the world. The path before him was difficult. He desired peace for humanity, but he could only achieve it through the application of military might. The most erudite of the Imperium's historians know that for his initial conquests, the Emperor wielded living weapons, the legions of thunder warriors. These techno-barbarians, transformed into mighty but flawed super soldiers with tragically short lifespans, served a singular purpose, after which their utility to the master of mankind was exhausted. By the time the Thunder Warriors understood their days were finite, the Emperor was already pursuing far grander ambitions and was engineering the first of the warriors, who would eventually become the Space Marines. Not even the most learned Imperial savants can say precisely when the master of mankind brought the Custodes into being. The answer lies buried somewhere in the fragmented accounts of the past, in tales conveyed through primitive pictograms or drawings in caves, and in records kept on stasis-preserved stacks of vellum, or in the pages of tomes sealed with genetic locks that no living being can open. These sources speak of towering demigods who strode at the Emperor's side, serving as his trusted protectors, esteemed counselors, and the keepers of his secrets. The Legio Custodes fought beside their master at the fortifications of the Vihal Stractor's fortress, and held back the ravening beast hordes of the trans-Nordic tribes in a conflict where the master of mankind personally slew the bloated butcher deity the Narthan revered. Custodian blades claimed the head of Gar the Devourer, struck through the heart of the Queen of Atlan, and repelled the iron fiends on the battlegrounds of Prima Vasilia. This is all that survives in the echoes of that remote age. In the closing years of Terra's unification wars, the Thunder Warriors finally grasped that their creator had granted them but a brief existence and, feeling betrayed, rose up against him. It was at this moment that an army of several hundred Custodes rose to defend the Emperor. It is thought that they were already under the command of the legendary Constantin Valdor. In quelling the insurrection, the Praetorians mercilessly annihilated the now obsolete Gene soldiers. When this ruthless and brutal purge of the unneeded armies concluded, providing a fitting end to an age of conflict, humanity's cradle finally knew a hard-won unity. To ensure the continued flourishing of mankind, the Emperor then looked toward the stars. In the years that followed, the great fleets of the Great Crusade set forth from Terra, with the goal of reconquering the galaxy. Their first action was to secure the Sol system, after which the Emperor, with great wisdom and statecraft, established an alliance with the planet Mars. Bolstered by the technological might of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the campaign gathered immense force, and the Crusades' armies surged out into the void. Billions upon billions of soldiers from the Imperial Army, majestic warships, the legions of Space Marines, and a multitude of other forces began the great work of reclaiming humanity's stellar empire. In the initial phases of the Crusade, the master of mankind himself led the charge. As the expansion progressed, the crusading fleets became ever more spread out, beginning to function with greater autonomy and, in the process, rediscovering the lost Primarchs, the Emperor's own sons. Everywhere the Emperor traveled, he was accompanied by the Legio Custodes, an invincible golden host of 10,000 warriors. They were armed not just with the finest weaponry and armor, but also with a vast array of secret archaeotech devices recovered by Terra's armies from long-lost human worlds. In addition to such marvels as anti-gravity battle tanks and shockingly powerful disintegrator weapons, the Praetorians were granted access to the supreme examples of Imperial military hardware. Their land raiders contained machine spirits of exceptional belligerence, while their bolters, power weapons, and heavy armaments were all individually crafted by the most masterful artisans. Such magnificent and supremely talented warriors were deserving of nothing but the best. In every battle the Emperor fought, from the demon-haunted citadel of the Overmancer of Styx to the mendacious empire of the pure-blood kings, from the savage conflicts of the Cold Harvest to the glorious victory at Ullanor, the unconquerable Legio Custodes fought at his side. Commanded by the master of mankind in person, The Praetorians were the bane of all his enemies, but their most difficult and heartbreaking ordeal was yet to come. Under the Emperor's guidance, it appeared that humanity was fated to rule the galaxy, but this was not to be. In an act of the foulest betrayal, precisely half of the Space Marine Primarchs rose up against their own father. This act ignited a civil war of a ferocity humanity had never before witnessed. It came to be known as the Horus Heresy, and it precipitated a catastrophe on a cosmic scale. It is worthy of note that as the brotherhoods of Space Marines engaged in vicious internecine warfare, and the Imperial Army and Collegia Titanica were sundered by savage internal strife, the Legio Custodes were, perplexingly, almost entirely absent from the main conflict. The handful of surviving records from that dark period only allude to the Praetorians' activities. There are hints that during the years of the heresy, a second, monstrous war was being fought, a war unseen by the rest of the Imperium, which only the Adeptus Custodes stood a chance of winning. Despite this, during that chaotic time, the 10,000 did participate in two battles of immense significance: the raising of Prospero, widely considered the first major engagement of the heresy, and the siege of Terra. The attack on Prospero took place before Horus's rebellion was made public. It was meant as a disciplinary action against the sorcerer Primarch Magnus the Red and his disobedient Thousand Sons Legion. On their distant homeworld, they had flagrantly continued their use of psychic powers and their deep explorations of the warp, in direct defiance of the Edict of Nicaea. What exactly compelled the Emperor to finally act is unknown, but fragmented accounts from several sources suggest that a psychic disaster unfolded on Terra, one with a direct connection to the Crimson King's mental abilities. In any event, Constantin Valdor and his Legio Custodes were tasked with commanding a force to apprehend Magnus and transport him from Prospero to stand trial before his father. Since their inception, the Praetorians had always carried the Magisterium Lex Ultima, a mark of supreme authority signifying that its holder was answerable to the Emperor alone. Yet they had never been given a mission of this gravity. Nevertheless, Valdor was determined to see his duty done. His intention was to resolve the matter through diplomatic channels, but the Space Wolves, led by their Primarch Leman Russ, joined his expedition, and the situation devolved into a merciless slaughter. The Fenrisian, goaded by Horus's duplicitous counsel and his own baseless hatred for his sorceress brother, shifted his role from Magnus's would-be jailer to his executioner. While the Captain General at first resisted Leman Russ's aggressive demands, it quickly became clear that the sorcerers of Prospero were deeply corrupted, leaving Valdor no choice but to commit his forces. He led his golden-clad brethren onto the surface of the blighted world, where the Custodes fought a horrific battle against the Crimson King's many followers. They were supported by the Sisters of Silence, whose null aura negated the psychic assaults of the Thousand Sons. It was only through the intervention of Constantine's warriors that Leman Russ's legionaries were able to withdraw from the engagement before a howling warp rift consumed the entire planet. The aftermath of the events on Prospero was a time of doubt and hesitation, but when the war finally reached the throne world, there was no question as to where the final defense would be made. Throughout the gargantuan siege, the Legio Custodes, fighting alongside loyalist Astartes in defense of the master of mankind and his palace, gave no quarter to the traitor Astartes. The Praetorians stood firm even as megatons of munitions rained down from the burning skies. Demonic entities tore through the fabric of reality, and traitor titans leveled city, destroying volleys from their cannons against the fortress ramparts. During that entire hellish conflict, Valdor and his 10,000 bravely threw back one attack after another. For all their heroism, the Custodes, to their everlasting disgrace, failed in their most vital duty. It is known that during the Siege of Terra, the War Master orchestrated the campaign from a distance, aboard his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, which remained in high orbit. As the assault reached its climax, with the throne world in flames and traitor forces overrunning the outer precincts of the palace, Horus inexplicably deactivated the shields of his battle barge. His reasons for doing so are a mystery. It is possible that some sliver of his former self, Horus Lupercal, remained, attempting to sabotage the plans of the Dark Gods. Or perhaps the arch-traitor wished for one final confrontation with the Emperor, to slay his father with his own hands. Whatever the cause, the Master of Mankind wasted no time. He gathered an elite force of Primarchs, Space Marines, and Custodes, and at his command, this strike team teleported onto the unshielded vessel. A hideous battle awaited them. The Emperor's champions, finding themselves separated throughout the defiled ship, were forced to fight desperately for their lives. Sanguinius, Lord of the Blood Angels, was slain by Horus's claw, but this was not the most terrible loss. Despite the valiant efforts of the Legio Custodes, they were no match for Horus Lupercal, who was infused with otherworldly power. Only the father possessed the strength to defeat his rebellious Gene son, but the victory was secured at an immense price. The War Master grievously wounded the Emperor with blows empowered by the warp, and by the time loyalists reached his side, his life force was but a fading ember. From that moment on, he has been confined to the Golden Throne, its mechanisms the only thing preventing his passage into death. From this state, he continues to watch over and defend the loyal subjects of the Imperium. If the Emperor's life were to finally cease, humanity would be fated to swiftly follow him into oblivion. The Guardian Spear, wielded by Heracloid, traced a perfect arc. The weapon's power blade sheared through ceramite, tissue, and bone, decapitating the traitor. His helmet, still containing his head, tumbled down the stairs. A fountain of crimson blood erupted from the wound. With a kick to the torso of the teetering corpse, the custodian sent it tumbling after its severed head, but he scowled upon seeing two more traitors in the livery of the Sons of Horus materialize at the foot of the stairway. He leveled his halberd and fired a volley from its inbuilt bolter at the newcomers. One was blasted off his feet, his chest plate ruined, but the other held his position and charged up the steps, returning fire. The custodian was rocked by the impacts of the bolt shells, though none could breach his auramite plate. A lesser warrior might have taunted his foe, enjoying his own invulnerability. Heracloid simply lunged forward with the speed of a striking viper and drove his spear through the faceplate of the legionary's helmet, giving him no time to evade. "The area is secure," the custodian reported via his Vox link, contemptuously flicking the dead traitor from his weapon. "The western stairway is also secure," came the reply from Linus. "Making contact at the northern archway," Arteris announced, and Heracloid could hear the sounds of clashing blades and roaring bolters over the link. "They're trying to force Peacemaker's square again. This is the third attempt," the Praetorian observed, moving with a measured gait to reinforce his comrade. "A more intelligent enemy would have understood by now that we are inviolable." "An intelligent enemy would not have forsaken the Emperor," Linus countered. "A valid point," Heracloid conceded, as the noise of gunfire grew more intense. "In that case, it falls to us to correct them for their foolishness." He rounded a corner, cycled the autoloader on his Guardian Spear, and performed a swift tactical analysis of Peacemaker's Square, its entry points, fields of fire, dead zones, and potential ambush locations. In a matter of seconds, the custodian was at the northern arch. The cacophony of battle poured from the passage, along with plumes of smoke shot through with muzzle flashes. Heracloid took up a position beside Artoris, observing that his comrade's golden armor was slick with the blood of his enemies. "Your arrival is welcome," the other said, firing rounds into the traitor legionaries pushing into the park. "World eaters," Heracloid spat, adding his own fire to the fusillade. "Deranged brutes." "Precisely," Linus affirmed, joining their makeshift firing line. "Let us see them exterminated." The Praetorians advanced on the traitors as one. Each bolt round fired by the Custodes found its target with deadly accuracy. Every perfectly timed step and swing of a blade turned the frenzied attacks of the berserkers back upon them. As blood sprayed through the air and the bodies of Astartes thudded to the ground, Heracloid was filled with an iron certainty. He knew that as long as a single custodian drew breath, the Emperor's palace would never be taken. After the heresy's conclusion, the Legio Custodes was reformed as the Adeptus Custodes. They adopted mourning attire, for they had been dealt a humiliating defeat. The warriors make no attempt to forget this failure, nor do they ask for absolution. Even now, their vigil continues without a second's pause. For 100 centuries, the Adeptus Custodes have stood guard over the Golden Throne, and in all that time, no foe has succeeded in breaching the Sanctum Imperialis. The Praetorians have a multitude of responsibilities on Terra. They not only secure the massive gateways that lead to the Emperor's throne room, but also the entirety of the palace grounds, which cover a landmass the size of a continent, an unimaginably demanding task. The Imperial Palace is a veritable labyrinth of fortresses, cathedrals, armories, crypts, macro-scale residential blocks, halls of justice, archives, shrines, spaceports, and innumerable other edifices. It is the Custodes alone who determine who may be granted an audience with the Emperor, an honor bestowed upon a vanishingly small number of individuals. They walk the halls of the palace, where endless lines of supplicants win their way, ever watchful for heretics or those bearing the taint of the Xenos who might have cleverly slipped past the outer security cordons. The Adeptus Custodes also oversee the soul-binding ceremony, in which thousands of psychers daily give up their life essence to power the master of mankind and the Astronomicon. Furthermore, the 10,000 stand watch over the deepest dungeons of the palace, where dangerous relics from the dark age of technology are kept, artifacts capable of shattering a person's sanity. Shield companies of the Custodes regularly venture from the sacred ground of Terra to assess the defenses of the Sol system, or to destroy any threat, no matter how minor, to the sovereignty of the throne world. The Praetorians also periodically engage in the Blood Games, an exercise where one of their number plays the part of an infiltrator or assassin to probe the palace complex for vulnerabilities, thereby helping to make it even more secure. For millennia, the Golden Sentinels performed this monotonous duty, governed by traditions that had ossified into rote rituals. As the rest of the Imperium fell into decay, and the Emperor's subjects over the centuries came to see the Custodes with a mixture of pious reverence and superstitious fear, they remained immune to doubt and weariness, never once yielding to despair. The Praetorians pay little mind to the ordinary humans who scurry about beneath them, and always maintain a guarded distance from even the most loyal space marines, for he who has betrayed his oath once is capable of doing so again. The Adeptus Custodes even direct this principle at themselves, which is why they never permit a single moment of laxity or doubt. Throughout the ages, the office of Captain General has either been held by one of the High Lords of Terra, or has served as their counselor, granting the position enormous power. In any case, the Emperor's bodyguards still wield the full authority granted to them by the Magisterium Lex Ultima. To this day, they have absolute control over the defense of Terra, and in matters of its physical and spiritual integrity, they answer only to their silent master. The Companions is the designation for the 300-strong cohort of Custodes who directly guard the Emperor upon the Golden Throne. They are hand-picked for this duty by the Captain General, who evaluates candidates with extreme care, considering their training, combat record, perceptiveness, spiritual strength, and a host of other qualities. There is no duty in the entire Imperium more vital than the protection of humanity's ruler. Consequently, when selecting the companions, neither the rank nor the veteran status of a Praetorian is taken into account, and warriors who are passed over in favor of younger or less seasoned comrades feel no sense of slight. The watchfulness of these bodyguards is ceaseless, though they are, naturally, rotated out for brief periods of rest. Even so, the duty is punishing to an infernal degree. Arranged in silent ranks about the Golden Throne, the guards remain at their posts for incredibly long stretches of time. They are motionless and mute, yet they can transition to full combat readiness at the faintest hint of a threat. The strain of this is mentally and spiritually taxing, even for the demigods of the 10,000. For this reason, if the Captain General decides it is time for a guardsman to step down from the ranks of the companions, his order is obeyed without question, and a new recruit takes the warrior's place. This, too, is not a mark of shame for a custodian. It is simply a practical recognition that even heroes have their limits when performing such a draining task. The most extended watch was held by Astoran Kalos, who kept his position in the silent formation for a full century without relief. Praetorians who have completed this service often go on to join the ranks of the solemn bodyguards known as the Ephoroi. Their duty is to protect the highest-ranking individuals in the Imperium, chiefly the High Lords of Terra, a group that includes the Master of the Navigators Guild, the High Logistician of the Adeptus Administratum, the Lord Militant of the Imperium, and the enigmatic Master of the Officio Assassinorum. The companions have served as protectors for all of them. Every warrior among the 10,000 understands that this duty is an extension of their oath to the Master of Mankind, as they are, in effect, guarding those essential to the administration of his empire. It is largely because of this role that the Custodes are held in such high regard by the aristocratic elite of Terra. Using just a few Custodes, the Emperor shattered the power of the recalcitrant despots of the Age of Strife and unified Terra under his rule. With only a few hundred bodyguards, he cemented his victory and crushed the Thunder Warrior Rebellion. Today, we are 10,000 strong, and we are prepared to bring our might to bear across the galaxy. 10,000. You truly believe, you insignificant creature, that your traitorous brethren have any hope of standing against us? If it can be said with justification that the Space Marines are the sons of the Primarchs, then the Adeptus Custodes are the children of the Master of Mankind himself. His essence flows through the bodies of the Praetorians, and his favor is so powerful that it acts as a shield, protecting the warriors from enemy assaults, both physical and psychic. The transcendent glory of the Master of Mankind runs in the veins of the Golden Guardians, shines from their eyes, and seems to electrify the very air around them, causing all soldiers loyal to him to feel an instinctive reverence and fear for these demigods of battle. The process for creating these exceptional warriors is known only to the trusted servants of the Imperial Palace. It is performed by the most accomplished gene wrights and biochemists on Terra, working in splendid laboratories, concealed from the rest of humanity. Because the Custodes serve the Emperor exclusively, are answerable only to him, and are beholden to no one else, the means of creating new recruits are kept secret. Not even the High Lords of Terra have access to this information. It is known, however, that every Praetorian begins life as a normal infant, the scion of one of the throne world's noble houses. To offer one's child for the most honorable service in the Imperium is a privilege beyond measure, and many of the great clans of the Terran aristocracy have eagerly given up nearly all of their newborn sons to earn it. The process of genetic alteration starts when the candidates are still very young. The sooner the creation of an Adeptus Custodes warrior is begun, the greater the likelihood of success. During the selection ceremonies, vast throngs of people line the avenue of sacrifice, located behind the Ascensor Gate. The onlookers offer fervent prayers and give rousing cheers for the esteemed representatives of Terra's high nobility as they parade past, basking in the public's veneration before, at the end of their procession, they deliver their heirs into the Emperor's eternal service. There is a good reason why the Adeptus Custodes, despite their remarkable longevity, have never numbered much more than 10,000. To put it simply, for each successful candidate who becomes a guardian of the Golden Throne, there are hundreds upon hundreds who fail. The creation of a space marine involves the implantation of gene seed and supplementary organs to turn them into living weapons, but the process for the Custodes is entirely different. The specific, mysterious bioalchemy that drives their transformation is unknown, but it works on a much more fundamental level, altering the candidate's very cells, and, it is rumored, even their soul. The enhancement of candidates is not limited to the physical and spiritual realms. Prospective members of the Custodes are subjected to intense mental conditioning. Their minds are deconstructed and rebuilt from the ground up, with the very fabric of their consciousness being reinforced like the walls of the Emperor's palace after the treachery of Horus, until the candidate's mind either becomes an unbreachable fortress or shatters under the strain. All aspirants endure sessions of mnemonic indoctrination and psychological augmentation. This entire process requires thousands of hours and is brutally efficient. Knowledge is quite literally hammered into the aspirants' minds, like inscriptions carved into steel, with such speed and force that many are driven mad. A custodian is required to master not only every facet of the art of war, including assassination techniques, counterintelligence, threat assessment protocols, and every known method of neutralizing an enemy, but also to learn disciplines that are not required of a typical bodyguard. Praetorians must undertake a thorough study of diplomacy, the theories of governance, stellar cartography, astrography, history, philosophy, theology, art, and a multitude of other subjects. This educational philosophy is a holdover from the time when the Golden Guardians were not just the Emperor's protectors, but also his counselors and learned companions. While candidates are now trained in this manner, largely out of respect for tradition and formality, the practice has clear benefits. This deluge of information not only weeds out aspirants with insufficient mental fortitude, but also guarantees that the Adeptus Custodes remain as enlightened individuals with a truly broad perspective. This level of enlightenment was the norm during the Great Crusade, but is now a great rarity in an age defined by fear and ignorance. The knowledge of the Custodes is a mark of their special status, and it serves as a stark reminder of how far the rest of the Imperium has fallen. To their credit, the Golden Guardians do not let this realization lead them to despair. For the Custodes, no knowledge is off limits. To best perform their duties, they must be completely aware of the terrible, dark powers that seek to dominate the galaxy. Furthermore, by exposing the aspirants to truths that would break the minds of ordinary mortals, their instructors can quickly identify which of the newcomers lack the requisite spiritual strength. Any recruit who endures this ordeal not only gains a deep understanding of the true meaning and stakes of the war for the Emperor's dominion, but also learns why no one outside the circle of the 10,000 must ever be allowed to know these things. No one who lives beyond the walls of the Emperor's palace has any idea how long the process of making a custodian actually takes. In any case, those who survive it are reborn as magnificent Praetorians, their bodies and minds utterly remade. Nothing of their old selves survives, and so, new members of the Brotherhood take on names drawn from the myths of heroes, monsters, and deities of ancient Terra. This custom is perfectly suited to the Custodes' superhuman status, and also allows the aristocratic families of the throne world to save face. Every clan can assert that it was their child who possessed the courage to become one of the Emperor's bodyguards, and there is no way to prove them wrong. The noble houses do indeed make such claims, and while the minds of the Custodes are fortified against the corrupting influence of sorcerers and psychers, they do not possess any warp-based abilities of their own. The Master of Mankind would not permit even the smallest chink in the mental armor of his Praetorians. Battle psychers are a formidable but dangerously unpredictable weapon. Their minds are vulnerable to subjugation by the entities of the warp, but for the Adeptus Custodes, this is not a risk. The most worthy candidates, those who passed the trials and were inducted into the Golden Legion, are immediately granted the respect of their new brothers in arms. Within the ranks of the Emperor's bodyguards, there are no novices or masters, only perfect warriors who grasp the immense responsibility that their power and status confer upon them. The glorious deeds of a custodian are recorded in the length of his name. At the start of his service, it is composed of a single epithet, but with every great act the Praetorian performs, a new component is added to his name. In the distant past, this honor was bestowed by the Emperor himself. Now, however, it is the Captain General, or sometimes a shield captain in the heat of battle, who marks the achievements of the brethren. Golden sentinels who have served for centuries may have dozens of names, which are inscribed on the inner surfaces of their armor plates and, in some cases, written in microscopic script upon their very bones. In addition to a new name, a neophyte of the Adeptus Custodes is issued his personal war gear. Whole dynasties of supremely talented artisans, charged with the creation of auramite armor and perfectly weighted weapons for each of the 10,000, make their homes in the gilded spires of Terra. The clans of House Halen and the Gilded Fist are particularly famous for their masterpieces of military hardware. Their cybernetically enhanced artisan barons forge true works of art. Moreover, the Custodes are given access to a vast repository of technology, much of it dating back thousands of years. Every type of war machine and piece of equipment used by the Golden Legion is a pinnacle of its design. Their exceptional quality, demonstrated time and again on the battlefield, is evident in the graceful Palace Grav attack vehicle, the Virtus Praetor's Dawn Eagle jet bike, the peerless Alaris pattern Terminator armor, and the Land Raiders and Contemptor dreadnoughts that saw service in the Great Crusade. The instruments of war carried by the bodyguards of the Master of Mankind never jam or break, as they are individually made by the most brilliant craftsmen in the Imperium, and their war gear is serviced according to the most exacting protocols. For the defenders of the Golden Throne and their military equipment, no weakness or flaw is acceptable. Given the Custodes' extraordinary equipment, their ceaseless training regimens, their years spent in holographic warfare simulations, and the clandestine conflicts the Praetorians wage in the Emperor's name across the Sol system and far beyond, it is hardly surprising that the 10,000 are the premier military force in the Imperium. The Adeptus Custodes are, for all practical purposes, immortal, but even they can be diminished. Some suffer injuries that render them incapable of fulfilling their duties as warriors. With prosthetic limbs, artificial eyes, or bionic organs, they are no longer physically perfect. Others perceive a decline, however slight, in their mental faculties, but one that is still significant enough to affect their reaction times, their memory, or their focus. For the vast majority of the Imperium soldiers, a reduction in attack or parry speed of 1/10 of a second would be almost unnoticeable. For a Praetorian, however, Such a deficiency means that his watch has come to an end. When a custodian determines that he is no longer fit to serve, he places all his war gear in the armory, puts on a hooded black robe, and disappears into the great, empty void of the galaxy. These noble exiles, however, do not cease to protect the Emperor of mankind. They wander and observe. Some act as lone agents, moving like grim, ominous shadows through the darkest regions of the Emperor's realm. Others establish networks of informants and spies, using fear and coercion to command obedience where loyalty and honor have failed. When these guardians, known as the Eyes of the Emperor, uncover a potential danger to Terra and the Master of Mankind, they transmit a warning to the Captain General via clandestine communication networks. Alerted to the threat by the Emperor's eyes, the Adeptus Custodes can then launch effective punitive missions throughout the galaxy, often neutralizing the danger before it can fully materialize. The Imperial Palace on the Throne World is the most massive and most heavily fortified defensive structure in the Imperium. It covers an entire mountain range and stretches for thousands of kilometers over Terra's surface. The Adeptus Custodes are charged with the security of this immense fortress, and they perform this duty with unflagging assiduity. Even back in the age of the Great Crusade, the palace was a marvel of engineering without parallel. The years since have brought about profound and irreversible transformations. At first, its aesthetic beauty had to be sacrificed to allow the complex to endure the siege of Horus's forces, and the battle itself against the War Master's traitorous legions resulted in catastrophic damage. Following the end of the heresy, the Emperor's halls were essentially constructed anew, this time as the most formidable fortress in human history. In the 10 millennia that have passed, it has relentlessly grown, both outward and upward, while gradually succumbing to a state of decay. The once clean lines of the palace are now lost beneath layers of Gothic ornamentation and the crude, monumentalist creations of the imperial cult. What was once a graceful and magnificent edifice has become a hunched behemoth, a clumsy example of brutalist architecture that brandishes its military power, as if to defy the nightmares of the cold, dark void. Its fate is perhaps the most potent metaphor for what has befallen the Imperium as a whole. But even though the palace is now a garish parody of its former glory, the Custodes continue to guard it with unwavering reliability, and this is an exceedingly difficult job. The perimeter of the palace's exterior walls is thousands of kilometers long. The colossal spires of its residential macro complexes and spaceports rise through the upper layers of the atmosphere, reaching into the void like the spines of some creature with a phosphorescent hide. The substructures burrow deep into the sacred crust of Terra, in some places descending for hundreds of miles. There are no documents in the archives that catalog all the numberless halls, corridors, vaults, bastions, and plazas of the palace. Within its confines live national enclaves, territorial clans, and techno-urban tribes of servitors numerous enough to populate several star systems. Nevertheless, the Adeptus Custodes are responsible for the security of the entire complex. It is they who patrol the vast, seemingly infinite walls, who stand guard over the armories and shrines, and who protect the pilgrim routes, the famous spaceports, and the gargantuan fortifications. The Praetorians conduct inspections of the orbital defense cannons and space stations, whose weapon batteries are many kilometers long, and they stand a tireless watch over the crypts deep within the palace, where secrets of such a terrible nature are kept that their revelation would mean the end of humanity. And yet, the Golden Legion possesses sufficient warriors and determination to handle these and a great many other responsibilities. For millennia, the shield hosts of the Custodes have discreetly assembled aboard commandeered starships and set out to destroy dangers identified by the Emperor's eyes as they roam the void. In addition, squads of Praetorians make regular patrols of the Sol system, relieving their comrades stationed in the garrisons of military outposts orbiting the Moon, Venus, Pluto, and the many stellar fortresses in deep space that watch over the approaches to Terra. It is also known that the Adeptus Custodes have a long-standing relationship with the Imperial Fists chapter. These Astartes continue to aid the Golden Guardians in protecting the routes into the system. Their massive star fortress, the Phalanx, has, for periods of decades or even centuries, often been positioned in a defensive orbit above the throne world. The Custodian Guard had remained almost entirely within the Sol system until the emergence of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift that tore the galaxy in two. In the realm of Ultramar, a brilliant beacon of hope was lit. Through a great sacrifice and the workings of otherworldly powers, Rowboat Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines who had been on the verge of death, was brought back to life. His return precipitated enormous changes. During the Horus Heresy, when the traitor legions laid siege to the Imperial Palace in the final, decisive battle, Primarch Rowboat Guilliman and his Ultramarines were too distant from Terra to aid their father. It is likely that the destiny of the galaxy would have been very different had he been present for that conflict. The resurrected Rowboat, however, was grimly determined not to allow such a mistake to be repeated. Witnessing the dark perils that threatened the entire Imperium, he made the audacious decision to launch a crusade that would take him across the stars on paths of unprecedented bloodshed, all the way to the throne world itself. There, Rowboat Guilliman was welcomed as a hero. Aquila Commander Culquin arranged for him to have an audience with the Emperor, after which the Council of High Lords of Terror restored Rowboat to the office of Lord Commander of the Imperium. Though the returned Primarch projected an aura of stern majesty, he was privately horrified by the condition of his father's empire. To drive back the invading hordes of chaos, Rowboat Guilliman at once began to implement reforms, brushing aside the obstinacy and fossilized dogmatism of the Adeptus Terra's bureaucrats. The Primarch's resurrection could not have come at a better time, for shortly after he began his work, the tidal wave of fury unleashed by the Great Rift crashed down upon the Sol system. While the throne world itself was not caught in the warp-spawned tempests, it was battered by the shockwaves of the Imperium's disruption, which, for a time, snuffed out the light of the Astronomican beacon. All of Terra, from its highest spires to its deepest vaults, was plunged into chaos and hopelessness. The Golden Legion was forced to put down riots, crush the uprisings of doomsday prophets and their followers, and wipe out frenzied mobs of despairing supplicants who had been driven insane. Squads of the Custodian Guard fought without respite in the dark catacombs beneath the palace, where ancient evils, freed from their cells after their runic seals burned out, were now loose. But an even greater horror was yet to be unleashed. In an attempt to land a final, crippling blow on the Imperium that would shatter the entire state, vast hordes of Khorne's demons tore through the veil of reality and attacked the Lion's Gate. Legions of shrieking creatures washed over the palace like a crimson sea, and a savage battle began. The gun batteries on either side of the Lion's Gate, each as large as a battleship, blasted fiery craters in the ranks of the demonic army, but they could not win the battle on their own. It was then that the combined forces of the Adeptus Custodes, the Ultramarines, and the Sisters of Silence, led by Rowboat Guilliman and Captain General Trajan Valorous, marched out to meet the demons in battle. They confronted the enemy at the very walls of the Imperial Palace. The scenes of the conflict were eerily reminiscent of the horrors of the Siege of Terra, which had taken place 10 millennia earlier. Once again, the Praetorians clashed blades with the maddened butchers of the Blood God. This time, however, the Custodes were commanded by some of the most legendary heroes in the Imperium's history, who were fiercely resolved not to allow the failures of the past to be repeated. And so they were victorious. The demonic assault was led by 8 bloodthirsters, but the warriors of the Master of Mankind cut them down or blasted them apart, one by one. The Golden Guardians, too, sustained grievous losses. Many noble defenders of the Emperor, who had stood watch over him for thousands of years, fell to the bronze axes of the hated spawn of Khorne. And yet, even as the heavens themselves roiled with clouds of blood red, raining down a scarlet torrent upon the earth, the legions of the god of rage slowly discorporated, howling in fury and frustration. In the aftermath of the assault on the Lion's Gate, a stark reality became clear. Although the Inquisition apprehended and executed a great number of those who had witnessed the battle and did its best to erase all evidence of it, the leadership of the Adeptus Custodes formally declared that they could no longer ensure the safety of Terra without taking special, proactive measures. If the servants of the dark gods had managed to breach the defenses of humanity's cradle once, they could certainly do so again. And so, Valorous and rowboat Guilliman met behind closed doors, their meeting shielded by complex wards and layers of psychic protection, to discuss changes to the official status of the Adeptus Custodes. It was a given that they would not be relieved of their duty to guard the palace, and that their brethren would continue their unblinking watch in the Emperor's throne room. However, based on a logical interpretation of the oath sworn by the Praetorians, they came to an agreement to broaden their sphere of duty far beyond the borders of the solar system. From that time on, a greater number of shield hosts have set out on campaigns from Terra, their paths guided by alpha plus level astropathic intercepts, the visions of seers, and the dispatches of the Emperor's eyes, who continued their work. The objective of these forces was to eliminate the most dire threats to the existence of the Master of Mankind. In pursuit of their missions, they have journeyed across the galaxy, even venturing into the benighted realm of the Imperium Nihilus, on the far side of the great rift that bisects the cosmos. But their primary concern has always been the sanctity of the throne world. To that end, several shield companies were assigned to the Indomitus Crusade, where they served alongside rowboat Guilliman as the Emperor's emissaries. They brought reinforcements of Primaris Astartes and the technology needed to create them to beleaguered space marine chapters. The very presence of the Custodes was a clear message that this was a gift from the Master of Mankind himself, and that to refuse or misuse it would be an act of profound disrespect. Other shield companies were established as permanent garrisons at defensive positions on the outer fringes of the Sol system. Still others went even further afield to secure key warp routes to Terra that were still relatively stable. Some Custodes have been given special assignments and are now engaged in hunting arch-heretics, searching for artifacts vital to the Imperium's survival, or waging a secret war against humanity's hidden foes with redoubled effort. Not since the days of the Great Crusade have so many Custodes been active outside the bounds of Terra. Chapter 2: The Organization of the Golden Legion. To an external observer, the command structure of the 10,000 seems Byzantine. To other imperial bodies, to whom the Golden Legion occasionally deigns to report, its chain of command appears to be needlessly elaborate and excessively inflexible. This is partly a matter of tradition and partly a result of their secretive nature. The reality is that the Adeptus Custodes are organized according to a dependable and strategically adaptable system. The Emperor's Guardians, as a military body, constitute an army of peerless warriors, every one of whom is superior to the members of any other organization in the human state. No agent of the Imperium is permitted to give an order to a custodian. Even figures of such immense authority as the members of the Council of Terra or Lord Commander Rowboat Gilliman, can only petition the Praetorians for their aid. They cannot command it. As is appropriate for a fraternity of elite warriors, the internal command structure of the Adeptus Custodes is remarkably straightforward. Their supreme commander is the Captain General. This position has been held by a succession of valiant leaders over the millennia, ever since the enigmatic vanishing of Constantine Valdor. This commander has absolute authority over the Golden Guardians and serves as the Emperor's ceremonial second in command, speaking with the voice of the Master of Mankind. The next level down is the Custodian Tribune, a council of 10 veteran members of the Golden Legion who act as advisors to the Captain General. The makeup of this council is regularly altered to maintain a balance of wisdom, experience, and new perspectives. To be a member of the Tribune, a Praetorian must have earned at least 10 names and must have led his brethren to victory in battle on no fewer than 3 occasions. The minimum period of service on this council is 10 years, a time which the warrior spends away from the battlefield, dedicating the full power of his formidable intellect to assisting the Captain General with matters of strategy and diplomacy. Below the ruling council are the Shield Captains, brilliant commanders who lead their fellow warriors with unflinching courage. The diverse titles held by these officers, such as Supreme Castellans, Aquila Commanders, or Master Guardians, are often tied to their specific responsibilities. It is the Shield Captains who command the Custodes in combat situations. Typically, one of them will assume overall command of a mission, while several others will lend their skills and expertise to support their comrade. All other Praetorians are considered to be of equal rank and are organized into informal brotherhoods known as sodalities. A custodian's choice of which brotherhood to join is determined by the strategic role assigned to him within the 10,000. But whether a custodian serves among the Virtus Praetors on their swift gravitic jet bikes, in the heavy assault units of the Alarus, or with the steadfast wardens, he is granted exactly the honors his brothers in arms believe his deeds have merited. The Golden Legion is set apart from the great majority of other military bodies in the Imperium by the absence of a rigid organizational structure for its armies. To accomplish their objectives, the commanders of custodian forces are free to select nearly any combination of warriors and equipment they see fit, adhering only to the most basic guidelines for unit composition. An individual task force of the Adeptus Custodes is known as a shield company. The size of such a unit is flexible, as the shield captain chooses his warriors based on the mission at hand. He can form a force ranging from a small team of Praetorians to a powerful army reinforced with gravitic jet bikes, tanks, and dreadnoughts. In typical circumstances, a shield company is composed of 30 to 40 custodes under the command of a single shield captain. When a larger force is required, several of these units can be combined to form a shield host. This formation, made up of dozens or even hundreds of Golden Guardians commanded by a conclave of shield captains, possesses enough power to annihilate any enemy army and subjugate an entire star system. A force of this magnitude is assembled only under the most extraordinary circumstances, when the mission cannot be entrusted to any other armed organization in the Imperium. When a host is sent into battle, it carries out the will of the Master of Mankind with unshakable resolve. A shield host is usually commanded by several shield captains, who are advised by the wise counsel of a Vexillus Praetor. A single shield captain still commands each company, though he may be assisted by a few warriors of particular distinction. The support troops and assets assigned to a shield company are known as the Imperiales Auxilia. This can include armored vehicles, dreadnoughts, temporarily requisitioned warships, and even non-combatant intelligence agents. All the auxiliary forces and assets assigned to a shield host, which serve its constituent shield companies, are referred to as the Maximus Auxilia. In practice, however, they continue to fight alongside their original shield companies. An example of a shield host is the Solar Furies, which was first brought together in the late 36th millennium to combat a Necron force that had awakened on a planet dangerously close to Terra. Since that time, the units of this host have fought together on numerous occasions, usually being assembled to deal with threats that have suddenly appeared in or near the Sol system. It should be noted that the Solar Furies are an unusually large formation. The term shield host generally refers to any force that comprises two or more shield companies operating under the command of several shield captains. Imprisoned in the deep places of the palace are incarnate nightmares and otherworldly horrors from the dark days of the old night, beings with the power to obliterate the Imperium. The duty of the shield host of the Shadowkeepers is to stand guard over them until the end of time. These Custodes are the keepers of the keys to the sigil-locked gates hidden in the dungeons of the Imperial Palace. Only the Shadowkeepers know the secrets of unlocking the runic seals, dismantling the protective wards, and passing through the sacred circles, and only they understand that these things must never be done, for the dungeons hold entities so monstrous that their escape would plunge all of humanity into madness. This heavy burden of a watch is borne by a full shield host. Over 100 Praetorians patrol the dark, silent corridors, standing a vigilant guard over the terrible legacy of the Age of Strife. Most mortals would be driven insane by such a task. Although no sound comes from the forbidden cells and nothing can be seen behind the doors, the very air in these passages is thick with a sense of dread, and the constant proximity of evil causes the shadows to deepen and writhe upon the walls. In these grim, stone-walled enclosures, even the superhuman warriors of the Adeptus Custodes feel on edge, for they are never free from a feeling of unnameable menace. The fact that the Shadowkeepers perform their duties flawlessly, sometimes remaining at their posts for decades without relief, is a testament to their discipline and spiritual fortitude. This shield host has a high number of custodian wardens, as their oaths of protection aid the warriors in concentrating on their singular duty, to the exclusion of all else. The commanders of these grim sentinels are armed with ancient weapons of unknown origin, which they are permitted to use as a last resort should anything escape from the dungeons. For 10,000 years, the Shadowkeepers performed their duty with perfect success, but the coming of the Great Rift changed everything. As the raw power of chaos flooded the stars, unheard of abominations from the past clawed their way into the light. Even more terrifyingly, some cells were suddenly found empty, as some unholy power had spirited away the artifacts and beings they contained, and now they plague the galaxy once more. Fearing what could happen if the powerful relics of the Age of Strife were to fall into the wrong hands, detachments of the shield host have at last ventured forth from Terra. These Custodes are tasked with reclaiming what has no place in the Imperium, destroying any who would obstruct them, and returning the foul trophies to the cells where they are meant to be kept. Over the last several centuries, many shield captains have been given command of the Shadowkeepers. The position comes with the title of Lockwarden, which the custodian holds for life, and which earns him the profound respect of all his brethren. Such a warrior is expected to be the most watchful of guards, the most vigilant and alert warden on all of Terra. Furthermore, if any creature or artifact were to disappear from the dungeons, or if a new threat were to emerge that needed to be contained within the palace's vaults, duty would demand that the Lockwarden personally lead the effort to deal with it. This position is currently held by Shield Captain Borsa Thurk, who has served in this capacity for a century and a half. He is a grim and intimidating warrior of pious conviction, completely without fear, unbending and ever watchful, the perfect Lockwarden. Prior to the outburst of the galaxy-spanning storm, Thurk had left Terra on only 2 occasions. Since the opening of the Great Rift, however, he is rarely on the planet, a fact that speaks volumes about the dire state of the Imperium. Custodian Warden Dial Feldgar is one of the Shadowkeeper's resolute warriors with a piercing gaze. The somber color of his armor evokes the gloom of the dungeons, while the deep crimson of his left shoulder pad and decorative trim marks him as a member of the Shield host. Praetorian Gar has been a guardian of the secret dungeons for 17 years, a time during which he has left Terra 3 times on highly clandestine missions to recover what was lost. It was the Blade of Dial that brought an end to the slithering Dreamer on Terran Roman 4, and this grim victory is commemorated by the new names that have been inscribed on the inside of the Guardian's armor. In carrying out our duty to safeguard the Emperor, we are not limited by the confines of his palace. Our war is like a perpetual game of regicide, played out simultaneously on an infinite number of boards against an infinite number of foes. In such a game, one must always show creativity, act with foresight, and take the initiative at every opportunity. We must be able to see as far ahead as possible and make every move with perfect precision. The smallest mistake will result in total defeat. When the Seers of Doom in the palace peer into the currents of the Imperium, looking for portents of coming disasters, they also identify certain individuals who, through their personal example, their ideas, or their actions, could avert a catastrophe before it threatens the Golden Throne itself. These pivotal figures are given a unique honor. They are placed under the protection of the Aquilan Shields. In this way, a small force of Custodes can ensure the survival of a military or spiritual leader, thereby contributing to the defense of the Emperor. The Aquilan Shields are an informal brotherhood made up of warriors from different branches of the 10,000. The bodyguards typically form small groups, and after crossing the Sea of Stars, make their way to their charges, wherever they may be. The Custodes provide no advance warning and do not ask for permission. They simply appear as if from thin air. These living embodiments of the emperors will then announce that a particular individual is now under the protection of the sovereign of mankind. This is an honor that the chosen person cannot refuse, no matter their station in life. The guardians of this shield host have protected members of the Council of Terra, abbesses of the Adeptus Sororitas, Lords Inquisitor, Astra Militarum commanders, and Space Marine captains. They have even guarded 2 crusade leaders who bore the title of War Master, with the Aquilan shields showing remarkable forbearance, setting aside the historical connotations of the one who first held that rank. Yet the Custodes have also materialized in a flash of golden light on the front lines, using their blades to shield eloquent preachers, awe-struck militia commanders, and other seemingly minor figures. The one thing that all these individuals have in common is this: it is foreseen that under the watchful eye of the Emperor's own bodyguards, they will perform incredible feats in the defense of the throne world. The Praetorians fight on their behalf, so that this prophesied future can be realized, and they will protect their charges from all harm until their potential has been fulfilled. At that moment, the Custodes will depart without a word, leaving the chosen to their own devices. This often ends badly for them, but such matters are no longer the concern of the Aquilan shields, unless the safety of the Golden Throne is at stake. Takis Orion is a custodian warden who has served with the Aquilan shields for over 4 centuries. His membership is indicated by the regal purple of his left shoulder guard and his robes. During his service with this brotherhood, Orion saved Arch-Cardinal Mumes from demonic, would-be assassins. He protected the High Lord of Terra Vendis during the Red Razor rebellions, and also shielded a young preacher named Lauren, who was astounded by this honor, from the horrors of war. In the end, the selfless youth committed an act of martyrdom and was elevated to sainthood, an event which altered the course of the campaign across an entire sector. The Dread Host is a military force of astounding power. It is composed of hundreds of custodes, organized into numerous shield hosts, who travel aboard the Moritoi, 3 warships built before the heresy. The mission of this army is straightforward: to confront the enemies of the Emperor, acting as the embodiment of his wrath and his justice. This formation does not use swift, surgical strikes, nor does it engage in covert warfare or systematic defense. Instead, the shield captains of the Dread Host meet in council to identify the most obvious and pressing threats to the Segmentum Solar, after which they annihilate these enemies with such ferocity that the shockwaves of the brutal battles can be felt even in the warp. Sometimes, a single starship is sent to the target. On other occasions, 2 are deployed. Since the founding of the Imperium, there have been only a few times when all 3 Moritoi have been sent out against a single foe. Whatever the case, the result of the battles is always the same. The Golden Guardians, with dozens of Adeptus Custodes leading the charge, overwhelm their opponents with massive assaults. They butcher enemy soldiers and rip apart their war engines. They pull down false idols and consign them to the fire. They level defiant cities, demolish enemy strongholds, and exterminate their allies and supporters. They serve as a horrifying object lesson in what happens to those who would dare to defy the Emperor's authority. They ignore all attempts at surrender and allow no one to escape. And when the Dread Host has finished a war, nothing is left of its victims but terrifying stories of the merciless punishment meted out by the hand of the Emperor of mankind. They have laid waste to Eurosarach and star systems consumed by rebellion, crushing traitorous crusades. They have fought enemies that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1, and have won through superior tactical genius, speed, and style. In every campaign, this host provides a demonstration of just how terrible the Emperor's anger can be. Merciless slaughter, complete annihilation, these are the methods they use to extinguish even the faintest thought of rebellion or invasion. The fortress that is home to the Dread Host dominates an entire district of the palace. This fortified citadel is lit by enormous electric braziers and arc lumens, which are arranged to cast their light on 500 massive eagle statues that stand on the upper parapets. The poses of these sinister statues, each the size of a super-heavy tank, make them appear to be vigilantly surveying the world. Many of the birds are looking up at the starry sky, while others are gazing down at the crowded ceremonial boulevards. Many superstitious people hold the belief that the eagles on the sanctum of 1,000 eyes are able to see treachery wherever it may be hiding, and that the Emperor himself is watching through the statue's eye sockets, searching for the darkness in human hearts. In a way, this is true. Within each statue is a network of long-range augurs, servitor agitator units, and multi-band listening devices that transmit streams of data to the Citadel's data chapels. By analyzing this information, the Dread Host can identify the Golden Throne's most dangerous enemies, who are then marked for destruction. Custodian Guard Caesarion Treverdes has been a member of the Dread Host for only 6 months, but in that short time, he has fought in 2 different war zones that, on a galactic scale, are considered to be just a stone's throw from Terra. During the Purge of Corrivan, the Praetorian mercilessly killed nearly 250 renegade guardsmen. At the battle for the Corrivan mines on Triton, he ran his spear through the Patriarch of the Genestealers, putting an end to the foul cult's master in a spray of hissing ichor. Des is proud to wear the mourning black pauldron and white tassets, the insignia of his shield company, which is currently a part of the Dread Host. Of all the star-spanning domains of humanity, the Sol system is one of the most heavily fortified. For the Adeptus Custodes, its planets, space fortresses, and transit corridors are all extensions of their master's palace, and thus demand their vigilant protection. Humanity's home star system is home to hundreds of military bases, from the huge orbital fortresses of Luna to the cloud-piercing citadels of Jupiter and the deep space battle stations in the Halo Belt. Billions of guns are trained menacingly on the dark expanse of the galaxy, ready to destroy anyone who would dare to trespass on the seat of the Imperium's power. Armored towers and bastions decorated with gargoyles loom over every interplanetary route, their surfaces warded against the unholy schemes of the many foes of mankind's ruler. Entire armadas of the Imperial Navy patrol these routes, ever watchful for the smallest sign of danger. But for Terra, there is perhaps no outer line of defense more reliable than the Custodes of the Solar Watch. The warriors of this formation, which is made up of several shield companies of varying sizes, are sworn to guard the distant strongholds of the throne world's defenses. These Praetorians see themselves as the first true line of the palace's fortifications. It is their sacred duty to stop any external threat from reaching Terra, and so they patrol the routes between the void structures and planets of the Sol system without cease, their vigilance never wavering for a moment. Although the Solar Watch mostly travels on Navy vessels and interstellar merchant ships, it has at its disposal an impressive fleet of ancient land raiders and makes extensive use of mechanized formations. This enables the Praetorians to react quickly to potentially dangerous situations and to crush their enemies with overwhelming force. Grave threats to the Sol biosphere are not common, but they do occur. The Custodes have thus played a crucial role in wiping out cults of demon worshippers, foiling inquisitorial plots, and combating cunning Xenos infiltrators on every planet in the system, except for Mars. In the past, the authority of the Golden Guardians also extended to the strongholds of the Tech Priests, but the Adeptus Custodes are wise enough to avoid straining their relationship with the servants of the Omnissiah. They visit Mars only on rare occasions, trusting the adepts of the Mechanicus to deal with their own local troublemakers. The captain generals who are proponents of active defense will sometimes assign the Solar Watch to carry out so-called Talon raids. For these missions, forces of Shield Company strength are assembled to strike at the most dangerous enemies in the star systems nearest to Terra. The Solar Watch does not waste its resources on attacks in war zones where there are already significant Imperial forces present. These Custodes prefer to deal with threats when they are still in their nascent stages, or to destroy enemies that have managed to break through humanity's other lines of defense. Riding in venerable land raiders, the Praetorians smash into the enemy with primitive armored wedge formations. The Golden Guardians make it a priority to eliminate enemy commanders and the most powerful creatures or war machines. Once the enemy army has been deprived of its ability to wage war, the Solar Watch will execute a sudden withdrawal, leaving the final cleanup to the ordinary forces of the Imperium. This is hardly surprising. The duty of protecting the Sol system is of paramount importance, and the Custodes cannot afford to be away from their posts for long. Phaedron Norris Caligus is a member of the Solar Watch and wears the formation's heraldic colors, marble white and red. He is the most senior and most highly respected warrior in his detachment, and he consistently provides his comrades with confident and impeccable counsel. The veteran makes sure that his allies never overlook a single detail or advantage in battle, and never give the enemy a moment's breathing room. Caligus and the warriors of his detachment have boarded large tonnage barges that were secretly ferrying cultists, and have decimated the garrisons of orbital platforms that had been derelict in their duties. During the expedition to Janus, under the command of Shield Captain Theetis, it was these Custodes who wiped out the cabal of flesh-sculpting witches, thereby preventing the Xenos from carrying out their atrocities against the Golden Throne. The Emperor of Mankind has long been confined to the Golden Throne, but there are some warriors among the 10,000 who claim to hear their master's voice in meditation or to feel the touch of his guiding hand. Other custodes, however, do not view these experiences as divine intervention, for they have never seen the Emperor as a god. The custodes believe that they are being touched by the unyielding will of the Master of Mankind, who, though trapped in a broken body, continues to issue instructions to his bodyguards, just as he did in the days when he fought at their side. Praetorians who have a particularly strong sense of this connection to the Emperor of Mankind become emissaries imperatus. They will gather together to engage in discussions and deep meditation in an effort to interpret their master's possible desires. With the unspoken consent of the Captain General, these guards will carry messages from the Master of Mankind to Imperial commanders, or, in some cases, will take an ancient artifact from the palace vaults and present it to the champion of humanity, who is best suited to wield the relic. Messages from the custodes have redirected the paths of entire crusades. Because of them, the Emperor's servants have been able to neutralize threats or discover caches of archaeotech that would otherwise have remained hidden from human eyes. Emissaries, imperatus, have been seen outside of Terra for millennia, though only rarely and in small numbers. Now, however, since the return of rowboat Gilliman and the start of the Indomitus Crusade, these Praetorians have become much more active. When the Primarch declared his intention to share the secrets of creating Primaris Astartes with the loyal Space Marine chapters, his plan was met with some opposition from the Adeptus Custodes, who were wary of giving too much power to those who had once rebelled against the Emperor and could do so again. But dozens of messengers of the throne joined the debate, asserting that this was the will of the Emperor of Mankind. They set out on the crusade with rowboat Gilliman, and many of them took on the role of Virtus Praetors, riding jet bikes so they could quickly bring the news of reinforcements to besieged chapters. Moreover, the mere presence of the custodes was enough to persuade even the most traditionalist orders to accept Primaris warriors into their ranks. No one would have the audacity to refuse a gift offered by the hand of the Master of Mankind. Arimanes Tyre became an emissary imperatus more than a millennium ago. He serves in a custodian warden squad called the Veritas Proclamation, and proudly wears the red shoulder guard and gray-white robes of his shield company. It was Tyre's hints, which he believes were granted to him by the Emperor, that guided the sacred Adeptus Mechanicus Explorator Crusade Gamma Hadash to the archaeotech treasures of Hadeng's world. It was the blade of Arimanes that cut down dozens of massive orcs who were the first to lay their hands on the techno-riches of that planet. Veritas' proclamation returned to Terra not long before the Great Rift was revealed, and the warriors of the division were among the first to declare their support for the Indomitus Crusade. These warriors have been forged by the arts of the Martian priesthood, and now they are given to you by the decree of the all-powerful Emperor. There will be no more questions. Be grateful for the honor that has been bestowed upon you today. The immortal Master of Mankind himself is offering you the gift of hope, and you will receive it with sincere gratitude and respect. If you do not, you will be considered traitors, just like the ones you are fighting against. There was a time when a full-scale invasion of Terra was considered to be completely impossible. With the coming of the Great Rift, that time is now in the past. At present, the Sol system has some of the most robust fortifications in the galaxy, where garrisons of determined warriors stand guard, protected by technology and faith. But the defense of the throne world is ultimately in the hands of the Adeptus Custodes. If any audacious or foolish invader were to approach the borders of the Sol system, their fleet would be engaged before it even crossed the Manville Point. There, in the asteroid belt, Colossus-class space forts are held in place by Imperial anchors, and are manned by specialized regiments of the Astra Militarum. Other outer regions of the system are protected by 1,000-kilometer-wide fields of void mines, which are patrolled by monitor ships and huge, intimidating hunter servitors that are shielded from the effects of the vacuum. If an invading force were to penetrate this barrier, they would find that the resistance only grows stronger as they move deeper into the system. In the darkness of space, fly powerful patrols of the Imperial Navy from the solar battle fleet, starships whose angular forms spell doom for any who cross their path. The void is dotted with observation chapels, fortress docks, fighter bases, and countless gun platforms whose shipboard lumens glitter like artificial constellations. The Grey Knights of the Inquisition and the Adeptus Mechanicus both maintain fortifications within the Sol system, which are defended by formidable forces. Furthermore, in accordance with an edict for the throne world signed by rowboat Gilliman, Terra and its neighboring planets have been given the right to raise numerous armies for their own defense. Taking into account the tireless efforts of the Solar Watch and the presence of the Phalanx, the unconquerable battle station of the Imperial Fists in geostationary orbit, it is clear that the Sol system is almost impossible for an enemy army to invade. However, there are threats to the Golden Throne that are not so easy to see, and for these, the Adeptus Custodes must maintain a special level of vigilance. An endless flow of pilgrims, merchants, officials, adepts, fanatics, emissaries, refugees, and many other people make their way to Terra from every corner of the Imperium. Every day, thousands of starships drop out of the Imperium, following rigidly prescribed approach paths to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Luna, and the throne world itself. Every planet and moon in the Sol system is ringed by living and docking platforms, while celestial bodies with a solid enough surface are covered with huge residential complexes, manufactories, and city-sized fortresses. A never-ending river of humanity flows here along the space lanes, and people are packed in everywhere. In such an environment, sedition, unrest, and heresy are bound to thrive. Of course, it is the job of the Inquisition to root them out, and some of the most zealous agents of the Ordos dedicate their entire lives to this task. Even so, even the most devout servants of the Imperium can fall prey to evil, such as nihilistic philosophies, the corruption of chaos, or the living magnetism of Xeno's fanatics. This is the very reason why the Adeptus Custodes always maintain a presence in the Sol system, patrolling and sweeping it with their own forces. The Golden Legion has control over the issuing of permits to the innumerable Imperial citizens who pass through the giant spaceports of Terra each day, and they also carry out unannounced inspections of the Void defense lines. In these actions, the Custodes do not follow any set pattern or schedule. Instead, they rely on their intuition, so that no one can predict their movements and avoid being caught. In addition, the Custodes make use of spy servitors, listening devices, and information-stealing subprograms in the hive cities of the Throne World and other planets. The Praetorians gather and analyze pieces of information that are collected even in the most obscure corners of the Sol system. They feed macro cogitators the size of battleships data on population movements and work shift schedules, the names of arriving starships, the texts of demagogue speeches, decrypted Vox intercepts, and much more. By processing this data, these massive machines generate daily data prophecies that help the Captain General in his decision-making, ensuring that the 10,000 overlook nothing. Finally, even the Phalanx, which is a key part of Terra's defenses, is considered a threat. As ancient archives indicate, during the Great Crusade, the Emperor frequently traveled the galaxy on this colossal, warp-capable battle station. In those days, it was the flagship of the Imperial Fists, and it continues to serve as the chapter's main base of operations. It is believed that during the heresy, this remarkable starship was in orbit above Terra and took part in its defense. If this is true, the Phalanx somehow managed to survive those apocalyptic battles, as well as the conflicts of the long millennia that followed. The Star Fortress came perilously close to being destroyed in the year that Cadia fell. First, the fortress was nearly overrun by demons that infested its decks as it passed through the Imperium, and then it had to fight against a traitorous armada that possessed immense firepower. But the battle station endured this trial by fire, successfully bringing many loyal warriors of the Imperium to the Sol system, and taking up a position that has been sanctified by centuries in orbit around the throne world. Since then, the Phalanx has been undergoing repairs, being brought back to full combat readiness, and having the areas that were tainted by the corruption of chaos purged. The sections of the Citadel are in a constant state of activity, with crews of genetically enhanced workers rushing back and forth, and the adepts of the Ministorum endlessly chanting their long prayers. It is no wonder that the Adeptus Custodes were able to easily place their agents there. These uninvited guests, who are hiding in plain sight, carefully watch the events on the Phalanx, ready to act decisively if the need arises. From the Custodes' point of view, even the most loyal Space Marine chapters are theoretically capable of treason. The Praetorians, as a matter of duty, do not forget or forgive anything, for they know what came of trusting the Primarchs. For this reason, if the Star Fort were to ever point its guns at the Imperial Palace, the Golden Guardians would activate secret protocols and destroy the Phalanx before it could even fire its first shot.